Hello, 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 everyone. Welcome to the Transatlantic Call-In Show. This is the place where you get to call in and ask two trans people any and every question you have about trans rights. So whether you are an ally who maybe has an uncomfortable question that you just can't ask the people you know, or maybe if you are some total dickhead who thinks that, we don't deserve human rights, we're gonna try to have a conversation with you. Mind you, while I want to have a conversation with you, that does not entail respect. If you are a dickhead, I'm going to be a dickhead right back to you. So, just a warning for all the people who think I'm not nice enough on this show, because I have gotten a comment recently.
I like petting dicks on the head.
Me too, but that's a different show. Anyway, I am your host, Arden Hart. So I am so happy to be here this week, and with me is a very special guest who we've had on before. Welcome, Stephanie.
Oh, hi. Hi, it's good to be back. Thank you for having me again.
Yeah, we love to have you here. I'm very excited. I know the sports topic is haggard, and you're probably hoping to avoid it if possible. But it's nice to have an actual trans athlete on.
Yeah, there are very few of us. It's very frequent that in the context of this discussion, among other things, trans. It's very few of us. And there's hardly ever are any of us at the table.
Yeah,
when these things are being discussed in the general public, not so in some of the levels of sporting organizations that are considering these issues for themselves. Depends.
Yeah. Well, forgive me for tokenizing your athleticism, but I'm sure your perspective will be useful today. So let's see. How's your week been? Let's just do a chill touchdown on what's going on in your life and what's going on with Stephanie.
Well, I've been struggling, and I do mean struggling, to complete a main sale for an Alarian 28, and I need to get the clue reef patches on and the edges done, and then put the full battens on, and it's taking me more time than I wished. In the interim, Tuesday night, we had a couple of good races in the Etchels and managed to win the evening. That was fun. We're in a battle for the season championship. We'll see how that goes. And in the J24s, we went out in beautiful blue skies. I posted a video on my channel of a short video of us sailing out to the starting line. And then I look behind us, and there's this enormous squall coming through. And Andrew Carey, the owner of the boat, said, any want to go down below? That's fine. I didn't have any foul weather. So I volunteer. I'm going down below. So we all went down below on the boat. Well, Andrew's sitting up there in the piss pouring rain. And when the thing got underway, I looked out the companionway. I said, Andrew, maybe you want to get the Genoa down. He goes, why? And I said, well, come the wind before the rain. Come the rain before the wind, time to get your topsails in. Which is an old nautical saying, and it's actually true. If you get rain before the wind hits, you're liable to get a big blast of wind. And sure enough, we got the Genoa down right in time. The boat went like this, and the wind did a 180. It was coming from the south, and it's coming from the southeast and came from the northwest in a big way. Meanwhile, it's pissing rain, and there was a beautiful, beautiful rainbow after it all cleared out.
That's so cool.
And then there was no wind whatsoever, so we couldn't sail, but it was a lovely evening, even if Andrew got soaked.
It's interesting. I, like most sports things, I'm very out of touch, but Sailing strikes me as like being a master of the weather somehow, you know, depending on the wind and like knowing when it's going to hit certain ways sounds so like you're an airbender or something. Very cool.
Yeah, there's an awful there's magic to it in a certain way, but it's not the the magic is the accumulation of knowledge, which is why it's a great sport for people who get old like me. I mean, you can keep doing it. You can keep doing it for a long time. You have to kind of stay in shape because it does require it's long stretches of boredom intermingled with frantic activity to move things around. So it's kind of it's fun, but the mental game is very fun, and that's either when you're racing or when you're just off cruising somewhere. It's prudent to know what's going to hit you, because you are definitely at the mercy of the wind and waves.
Yeah, that's super fascinating. Well, I wish you good luck on the rest of your races to come, and it's very exciting. So we do have some polls queued up. So we have a last week's poll, but last week we didn't have an episode because I had a terrible ear infection, which I have like 98% recovered from. I think there's still some lingering something going on in there, but I've also got a hearing condition, so it's kind of hard to tell the difference between the two. So last week's poll was going to be, do you think trans women getting womb transplants is ethically the same as cis women getting them? Now, I think there's maybe like a little bit of a wording thing here that's complicated to me. Like, I don't know if I necessarily see anything ethically different between them. I think there's probably a lot of medical differences to consider that could lead to some ethical situations, but in and of itself, assuming that we've gotten to a place where we're able to like functionally use the womb in the transplant, I can't imagine there would be any reason to consider them different. But I don't know, Steph, do you have any different feelings on that?
Yeah, it's the ethically part that no, I don't. I don't see. I think I agree with you entirely. If it's more of a question to me of the procedure involved and the procedures involved and the health of everyone involved. And again, it's another bodily autonomy question, really. I don't see the ethics. I don't see an ethics problem.
Yeah, that Matt and I were talking about this last week when we got this question about how like maybe there's some scenario where like, I don't know, maybe people will disagree with me on this, and I'd be happy to be someone to tell me why I'm wrong. But like, if it's a situation where trans women are unable to get pregnant or use the womb, it would seem to me to maybe be an ethical concern to allow trans women to get the womb transplant when somebody might be getting it for the purposes of like actually using it to get pregnant and have a baby, and kind of being like, if you're just getting it when it really serves no functional purpose, I don't really see the point. But maybe that's just a personal thing. I'm not entirely sure there.
I agree with that as well. I mean, I don't think it's the kind of thing that's like an earring.
Right.
It's like, well, it'd be a nice accoutrement to have, but
right.
there are women out there that don't have wombs. It doesn't make them any less women.
Absolutely.
So I don't know. I think that if it's important, whether you're a trans woman or a cis woman, if it's important to you to have that ability, I don't see the ethical problem. I do think that if it's not important to you, then you probably wouldn't do it anyway. Because while in theory we're close to having a uh, developing the modalities for seeing that sort of thing happen. We're not close to seeing it happen in practice. So
Right.
it's going to be, it's one of these procedures that's only going to be in the reach of probably a few people, I would think.
Yeah, I think I've only heard of a
Mhm.
couple of instances, and not even in America, of womb transplants taking place. And like, I feel like maybe I heard one pop news article about it leading to like a pregnancy, but I genuinely don't remember. So I think you're right to say that we are probably very far off from this being even really a concern that we have to contend with. But I do see this pop up on Twitter all the time of gender critical saying, trans women are evil for wanting to have a womb or something, which is that's obviously patently stupid. I as a trans woman, who would love to have a kid one day, I completely understand why trans women want that. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, we're definitely very far off from that being our current reality. So let's bring up this week's poll. Is it transphobic to vote Republican in the US? Now, I already saw there's like 30 at the time of this show going live. There was like 35% voted no, which I think is crazy. And the reasonings that I saw a lot of people saying was something to the effect of it's it depends on the candidate, which I think is irrelevant because the GOP platform is and has been for several years now one of their major policy focuses is trans rights and denying trans people access to women's spaces or whatever. So it's kind of silly to me that anyone could think that the candidate is relevant. If we were voting for, it may not be transphobic to vote Green Party. I think it's stupid to vote Green Party when we have, it's basically a vote against, a Democrat win, in my view. But I think to say that it's transphobic for that vote would not be the case. But for the GOP, for the Republicans, it's absolutely. And then the other thing I saw people complaining about was saying that it's wrong to call Republican voters transphobic. And this is a chronic problem with people whenever racism or homophobia or transphobia comes up. If I say, is it transphobic to vote Republican, I'm not saying anyone who votes Republican is a transphobe on a personal level. What I'm saying is the action that they took is unequivocally transphobic. Now, I can do transphobic things. Steph can do transphobic things. Anyone can do transphobic things, and it doesn't necessarily entail that they are a transphobe. But if you're someone like Richard Dawkins, for example, who repeatedly and further entrenches himself in making transphobic statements, that's when somebody has elevated themselves to the position where you can probably safely say that they are a transphobe. They have a fundamental worldview and concept of the world that is rooted in the prejudice of trans people, against trans people. But yeah, I don't know. What do you think, Steph?
I think that you start saying I'm not a transphobe, but then you might be a transphobe.
Right.
I'm not a transphobe, but I think that trans women are men.
Yeah.
I'm not a transphobe, but I think that you can't change your sex because sex is a binary. I'm not a transphobe, but and it's problematic. And you're right. The problem with voting Republican is their platform. They stand for this. They express it explicitly.
Yeah.
That children who are trans do not exist, basically, and therefore they shouldn't be afforded any sort of affirming care or any care that's not directed towards convincing them that they're not trans, which is that's been proven over and over and over again not to work. I mean, when I was born in the 1950s, that was default. That was the default. And it's not helpful to anyone. What you're doing there, whether it's the same for gay people, what you're doing there is teaching a young person to despise themselves, to be uncomfortable with themselves. And I don't care what the issue is. If you teach that, it's going to take a long time to get over it for anyone.
Absolutely. It kind of in that vein of what you're talking about, I feel like I noticed that Republicans and just kind of unaware cis people, maybe like sort of apathetic cis people, always seem to be like kind of 10 to 20 years behind the conversation on this, where like, you know, conversion therapy is a thought in their mind that that's viable when this has been done and evaluated and it's not a credible way to deal with trans issues at all. And then I hear kind of some of the more neutral leaning people will be like, oh, well, trans people are definitely real, but only if they have dysphoria. And it brings me back to like early 2010s when trans medicalism was like a really big thing in the community. And there was a lot of conversations about it in the community. And it's like, man, they are really like just following along the path. And I hope they keep going, because that means, you know, in like another 5 years, we should be like ace at the right place. But no, it is, it's frustrating.
I mean, the process and the discourse have changed over time. I mean, at the turn of the 21st century, well, that was when J. Michael Bailey got his start, and Ray Blanchard stuff. It's right in the late the 90s, that whole thing. And what's amazing is that discourse has continued right to this day. It had a period where it just ebbed away and it was roundly denounced everywhere. But now it's making its way back into the pages of the New York Times and other places, with other people picking up the threads of that. And really the godmother of the gender critical movement, Janice Raymond, you know, her stuff is still at the core of a number of these discussions in the discourse. And damn it, that was 1979. Come on, get over it.
Also, I see some people in the chat talking about like, oh, you know, I know people who are conservative and like Jen, I'm going to call you out, Jen. I love you. You know, we're good. But like saying like, oh, my parents are Republicans, but they support LGBT rights. Yeah, so are mine. But do you know what? I would still consider my parents transphobic on that basis. Like, are my parents transphobic in every aspect of their life? Probably they're a lot more better than most people, right? But it's undeniable to me that if you vote Republican, that is a transphobic act. That is a homophobic act. I like, you are voting for the party who advocates against the rights of marginalized people. Whether or not you actively pursue or want to entrench the marginalization of those people is irrelevant from the fact that you are voting for the party that will do that as a result of your voting for them. But all this was inspired from the GOP national debate that we saw a couple weeks ago, mostly because there were a few candidates on the stage who I was like, wow, you know, like, obviously I wouldn't vote for them. I'm sure they're still horrible people in a lot of ways, but there were a few candidates on the stage that I was like, they seem like in touch with reality. Like, that's kind of nice. You know, if we got them as a Republican president, I wouldn't think the world is going to end the way I would for Trump or Vivek or someone like that. But and I'm thinking of like Nikki Haley and Chris Christie, but then they asked the trans questions and it was like, oh, okay, no, they're all still pretty awful. And so this is what inspired this question in my mind. But I'm interested to see more of the dialogue. I failed to see the good arguments that say that it is not transphobic to vote for Republican. You may not be a full-fledged bigot, but it is a transphobic act. In my mind, unquestionably.
Yeah,
but
it's certainly contributing to the problem.
Yeah.
You're not being part of the solution, that's for sure.
Right. So let me see real quick before we get rolling with the show. I have to do my job here, which is to remind you guys that while Transatlantic is the best show on this network, there are other shows that you can watch if you really have nothing else to do. For example, like the Sunday show with Jimmy and Matt. Jimmy should be feeling up and ready for the Sunday show. So let's send our magical healing energy to Jimmy through the internet waves to get him ready to go for the Sunday show. I lost the date. I think we don't have as much of the next week's planned out because it's September and we tend to go month by month with our scheduling. But I see that John Gleason and Josh Bowen are going to be on Skep Talk on Monday. Tuesday will be with Dying Out Loud with Dave Warnock, assuming that he's feeling better. I know he was ill this past week. And on Wednesday, it'll be the Hang Up with Matt Dillahunty and an unconfirmed guest again. Before next Thursday, where we do not have our Artakis guests confirmed yet. Our Artakis hosts, I think we have a lot of availability with Katy and myself next month, but I also have a thing I need to travel for. So we'll see who it's going to be. I don't know. Also, patreon.com/calltheline. If you want to help us keep the lights on, that's how you do it. But with that, we have got... Oop, I hit the wrong key. We've got a number of callers on the line. Let's just start in order so that way I can have time to put the rest of these in my shortcut keys. Start with Clyde in Louisiana. Clyde's pronouns are he, him. You are on the line. What would you like to talk about today?
Hello, can you guys hear me?
Yep, we gotcha.
Yeah.
What's going on?
Gotcha.
Cool.
No problem.
I have what I think should be a super simple question just about terminology. And
Sure.
I've only heard the term gender critical here on the line.
Yeah.
And I'm just wondering, why do we use that term? Why not just call them transphobes?
Interesting. Steph, you have thoughts?
Yeah, it's a term that was adopted by people who had previously adopted for themselves the term trans-exclusionary radical feminist. They adopted that term for themselves, and then when people start, when their position is neither feminist but very definitely trans-exclusionary, they took offense. So it's like, don't call me a TERF because that's an insult. And so they started talking. Oh, I'm not a TERF. I'm gender critical. I don't accept the notions of gender, and trans people are reinforcing notions of gender and et cetera and so forth. And so I'd prefer to be called gender critical. Is that okay? So yeah, sure. That's okay. No problem. So you start calling them gender critical, and all of a sudden it's in the ass. You asked for it. Those are my thoughts anyway.
Yeah, I think... So, wait, is the question TERFs or just transphobes in general, just for clarity?
Gender critical, I think, is where I never heard the term before, except anywhere except on the line. It's everywhere in the discourse. But
yeah,
you probably hear it here because you don't pay as much attention.
I mean, for me, I don't... I'm happy to call them transphobes. I think gender critical is a more accurate description of what their belief systems are. But I mean, I'm perfectly happy to call them transphobic or TERFs. I don't think TERF is as politically useful. I definitely don't think they're feminists at all. In fact, I think that was going to relate to another caller down the road, but we'll get to that later. Yeah, I just think for me personally, gender critical is a more accurate way to describe the collection of people and the specific beliefs that they have. I think transphobe is more generally like a much broader net, talking about any behavior or belief or action which is rooted in prejudice regarding trans people. But yeah, I think it's more of a personal thing. I think it's also about gender criticals are like a organized group of people who are actively campaigning against the rights of trans people, whereas transphobe is kind of like racist or homophobe. It just kind of applies to anyone who might engage in this behavior, whereas when we're talking about gender criticals, we're really talking about like a specific political movement advocating against trans rights.
I gotcha. So every gender critical person is a transphobe, but not every transphobe is gender critical.
Bingo. You hit it right on the head.
Mm-hmm.
Just like pumpkins and squash.
Yeah, square and a rectangle kind of thing.
Yep, exactly. Square and rectangle, pumpkin
all right.
squash, it's all the same. Hopefully, is that it for you, Clyde?
Yeah, that was it. Sorry if it was short and not confrontational enough for good content. But thank you both very much. I appreciate what you guys are doing, and keep it up.
Thank you so much. Have a nice day, Clyde.
All right.
Bye.
No apologies necessary on the lack of confrontation. It's kind of nice sometimes to have conversations that are just more like, hey, I heard this thing, and what's that about? Because that is really like a big part of what the show is. But okay. I thought I entered one of these into the shortcut that I was going to take next, but let's do... Yeah, I got this one. Darius. Pronouns are he, him in California. This is relating to the last call.
Thank you so much for...
Yeah, what do you got for us, Darius?
Thanks for taking on. Well, I do a lot of content in this area, and I just finished a video on Anna Julia Cooper, and I just got to thinking about radical feminists. She's kind of lays the groundwork for not only what radical feminism is, but what we now call intersectionality.
Could you give me that name again? I couldn't hear you.
So maybe, I'm sorry, can you hear me better now?
I can, but could you say the name again? Repeat the name you were talking about of who you were doing this video on?
Anna Julia Cooper.
Okay.
Just a turn of the century radical, what I would call a radical feminist. And I'm just wondering if definitions have changed or what. Because I'm trying to understand where the radical in trans-exclusionary radical feminism is. I don't see anything radical about it. Whereas, I mean, I agree that it's feminist, and that's why that kind of the problem that I have with feminism is that the goal is kind of to get, like, say, for example, more female CEOs, whereas radical feminism is more to dismantle the system that creates CEOs. I just don't see, I'm not seeing the radical in that term. Where did that...
See, I would disagree with what you said, with part of what you said, which is that I don't think trans-exclusionary radical feminism is feminist at all in most of the time, in most cases.
Okay.
The TERFs that I interact with, and maybe this is just a matter of the people I've engaged with, but I've seen a lot of people who explicitly identify themselves as trans-exclusionary radical feminists who advocate for essentially the outcomes of what they're advocating for would be further entrench gender roles as we have them now. Like, little boys can't just play with dolls now because they'll be trans, which is not true at all. And if you follow that belief to its outcome, it's like, oh, so in your belief system, boys can only play with like trucks because that's what makes them a boy? Or because the positions I'm advocating for are let people express their gender however they want. If a young boy is playing with dolls and one of them says he's a girl and he draws a transition, great. And if the other one says, nope, I'm still a boy, I just like dolls, that's cool too. Yeah. That's the position trans advocates are advocating for. The TERF position would suggest that is a problem and we're indoctrinating children to become trans, which is like absurd. I would agree, though, it's not radical. It seems to further entrench the systems that we currently have, which is like the antithesis of radical feminism. So, yeah.
Sure.
I think the term has... Sorry, go ahead.
Go for it. No, go ahead. You go ahead. Sorry.
What I was going to say is that the term has a bit of a deeper history as well, because it goes back to people like Mary Daly back in the 70s, 60s, and 70s, who was a radical feminist and was Janice Raymond's mentor at the University of Massachusetts at Amherst, who was a radical feminist who came out of Catholicism. Both Raymond and Daly were actually Sisters of Mercy at one point in time in their lives, but they came out of this Orthodox Catholic background into rebellion against the patriarchy. So they consider themselves to be radical feminists with a deep distrust of anyone who didn't fit a binary anyway. And people that transgressed the line were anathema to them. So that's where phrases like appropriation was coming along. You're displacing women from their from their ability to choose roles. In other words, rather than seeing trans people as a challenge to the patriarchy, they saw trans people as a usurpation of feminism by the patriarchy in the context of someone who is, to their way of thinking, male, is appropriating female, and those people should be excluded. That's kind of where the radical feminist part comes from. It comes from further back in history.
But it also sort of, I guess, like Arden was saying, sort of reaffirms what it means. Like, this is what socially it means to be female. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yeah.
Like from what it sounds like you're saying, the objection to trans people was, there's a social definition of what it means to be female, and you are counter to that. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yeah. I mean, it's a very condensed version, sure. Like, without nuts and bolts, but yeah.
And this is where I said I agree that it might be feminist, because, again, I see the where I draw the line between feminism and radical feminism is that feminism can accept those gender roles, and just, whereas the goal is to sort of, like more female CEOs. I don't give a damn. I mean, I teach in Black studies, but by the same token, I don't give a damn about, more Black CEOs or more Black police officers or even a Black president. I'm more about dismantling the system that creates CEOs. And so by that sense, I can sort of call them feminists, but there's nothing radical about it.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is just kind of a problem with definitions about like philosophical concepts like this, where they necessarily require someone to self-identify into the group, and those people are going to vary. So, what classifies as a feminist? Well, sure, we can have some sort of vague concepts about like liberating, people of both, of all genders and sexes to live the life they want to live or whatever. It's hard to necessarily like exclude someone and say like, oh, you aren't feminist. Like I might say, like, by my definition, by most normative definitions, I would consider this person to not be a feminist, but it's hard to lump people or reject people from groups on that basis.
Yeah, well, it also comes from, again, back in that era, there was a famous women's festival, women's music festival, that took the position in Michigan, I believe it was, and I can't remember the name of it. But where they literally excluded, no, trans women not invited. No, you can't come. So it was like, you can't play in our sandbox kind of thing. And,
sure. I guess I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry. I could ramble on about that, but you go ahead.
I'm kind of coming from it from that angle. And again, teaching Black studies, I tend to put that framework on it. The same could be said about Black women. Whereas feminism didn't address really in a comprehensive way the issues of Black women. Mm-hmm. You can almost call it Black exclusionary feminism, because they didn't give a damn about, sure, we can agree on abortion rights, but when it comes to, the National Organization for Women didn't have a damn thing to say about welfare reform, which is an issue that impacts Black women. So again, this is where I'm kind of drawing that line. It's like, I can agree to this feminist. Ain't a damn thing radical about it. It's really the Alice Walkers and the Black people. What was her name? I can't remember her name. But anyway, that really put the radical in radical feminism. And again, beginning with Anna Julia Cooper, who was a black feminist at the turn of the century, really laid that groundwork.
Yeah, I get what you're saying. You know, they might be feminists, but what they're advocating for is not radical in any meaningful way. And I think it's hard. I think maybe it could be an effect of also growing up where in like my age range, the dominant concept of feminism was sort of like this newer wave of feminism that is more radical leaning and is more like abolitionist kind of leaning of gender roles. And so that's kind of the entirety of my concept of feminism. And I guess it's true to acknowledge that like the early waves of feminism were still arguably feminist, although not radical in any meaningful way, and probably not leading to the outcomes that those people were actually wanting, which was, you know, to be liberated from the things that were oppressing them.
I think de Beauvoir would fit right in as it stays, but there are many others that wouldn't, like Betty Friedan wouldn't. There's the number of people that wouldn't fit in to the way feminism has evolved and developed over time.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. I was just wondering, you know, has the definition changed, or am I just not understanding it correctly?
Yeah, no, it's interesting. Based on just reading the call-in notes, I thought you were going to be like very much turf leaning yourself. I thought you were going to be like, I think excluding trans women is very normal. There's nothing radical about that. But you actually had a much more enlightened take, which I appreciate. So thank you, Darius, for calling in.
Fuck that. Sorry, I thought I might have demonetized. Sorry about that.
No worries.
No, absolutely not. Yeah, no.
Sure.
But I appreciate you. That you gave me a lot to think about. I appreciate it. I'm just trying to clarify. Since I'm doing content in this area, I just want to make sure I understand this correctly.
Yeah, absolutely. And
it was great. It was great that you called in. It was a great call. Really appreciate talking to you. It's getting a little bit of perspective on the Black feminist movement.
Yeah, I meant to call in last week. I'm sorry you weren't feeling well, Arden, and I hope Jimmy's himself too. But speedy recovery.
Yeah, thank you so much.
If Jimmying himself works,
right?
You know, Jimmy away.
Yes, Jimmy away.
I appreciate you.
Thanks, Darius. Have a good one, and good luck with your content on feminism and turfism.
Thank you.
Right. All right. We've got full lines, and we're just gonna keep powering through. You ready, Steph? Let's
Yeah. Let's go.
All right, let's
make it go.
We're just gonna go in order that they've come in now, because I think we've got a good mix of spicy and non-spicy and medium level hotness takes. So we're gonna go for Shane in Vermont. Shane, it's trouble understanding.
I'm back.
Whoa. Let's see. We got a lot of feedback. Let me make sure there's a noise gate on here, so we're only hearing you when you're talking. There we go. All right, Shane, you are live on the line. What's going on?
I'm back again. Can you guys hear me better this time?
Yeah, it sounds like your mic. Do you have a headset on? If so, maybe move the mic a little bit away from your face because it's peaking.
No, I have a dynamic mic going into an interface right now.
Oh, okay. It got better, whatever you did there. So, all right, what's your question?
Well, I am in a really bizarre position because at the same time, I accept and completely understand the general gist of how, being transgender, happens and how it operates. Gender as a whole, as a concept, it just seems so ridiculous to me. And even though this is going to sound a little charged, I'm not actually mad about it, but I can't shake that common idea that, they're just accelerating binary gender norms and stuff, but I'm doubtful, but I'm optimistic. I'm just not sure how to wrap my head around it entirely. I'm 99% the way there.
I mean, to me, it's funny to think that any trans woman could be considered as accelerating gender norms because, we're definitionally transgressive of gender norms. That is what being trans is to transgress gender norms. So to some extent, I can understand, I identify as a woman and I have long hair. Maybe I'm contributing to the expectation for women to have long hair or something, but I'm pretty vocally abolitionist in my my ideology. So I understand where you're coming from. But yeah, I think I've heard this a lot, and I always find this kind of funny. Like, trans people are also, just generally speaking, like, as a group, far more transgressive of gender expectations than cis people. I know way more trans women who are very different in their expression of gender than I know cis women who are varied in their expression of gender. Maybe at a base rate, that's not true, but I like proportionally, I think as members of our groups, that would be the case. Stephanie, do you have different feelings on that?
Well, yeah, there's a couple of things. I think that we've talked, I know Arden's talked in the past about how gender identity and gender performance are two different things. And gender identity is something that's felt internally quite deeply, and maybe it's even the wrong word for whatever that feeling is. Maybe there's a better word that we haven't even invented yet. But if one has, if one takes on, if one has that feeling and wants to participate in the world, you're almost forced into gender roles, and these are the things that I don't like. You know, I was perfectly happy to wander around early in transition back, 25 years ago, and it's just not really caring about the clothes or the makeup or any of that stuff. I was just going sailing but meanwhile physically transitioning, because to me it wasn't about the clothes. It was about who I was, who I saw in the mirror, who I felt like at any given point in time. And the interesting thing about that was that my women friends were basically saying, "Hey, honey, you really got to do this. You really got to do this. You really got to." So I was being socialized at in my 40s. I was being socialized the way girls in their teenage years are socialized to perform gender. And what is very curious about it all is that it makes people around you a good deal more comfortable if in certain circumstances you adopt the raiment of gender. It makes people a lot more comfortable around you. It makes people a lot less confused. It makes it just
I don't
makes
know what that word means.
interactions better. What word?
It sounded like Rayman or something.
Raiment, clothing, garb, stuff you put on.
Oh,
good word.
I think we're maybe having some mic issues with you, Shane. You're coming in and out.
Sorry, I'm fiddling with the volume knob. I probably shouldn't do that.
Yeah, that would be nice to not do that, because I thought we were losing connection with you, but then you came back in.
Yeah. Well, that was really enlightening. I think that kind of flipped whatever biases I had at a decent amount, but I have a really crazy bomb that I think I want to drop into the line here. It's not controversial. It's just something about me. Are you ready for this?
All right.
Every time I imagine myself in my elderly years, I cannot fathom the idea of being an old man. So my internal dissonance is even crazier. It's like I feel a bit more inclined that being an older woman was closer to it, or maybe I'm non-binary or something. But
that may be.
It's just
it's
absolutely bizarre.
Worth exploring. Although I'll note, for me, and I think it's perfectly possible for someone to have that feeling and to not be trans. I don't want to speak on the experience of every person, but I will say for me, a similar feeling was an indicator for me that I needed to transition, which was that I could the notion of growing into an adult man was the most like distressing thought that I could possibly sit with. I was hospitalized many times while trying to force myself to be a man. It was so difficult for me mentally, socially. It was just not and not everyone's going to have that level of distress, but I'll say just I think it's worth exploring. If that's a thought in your mind, it's worth, if you have a therapist or some close friends that you think you can confide in that wouldn't judge you or expect you to come to some sort of answer anytime soon, I think that's a feeling that's worth exploring a little bit more and understanding where it comes from for you.
Yeah,
Sorry, go ahead.
You can go ahead. There's nothing important I was going to say.
No. I was just going to say, you know, the most important thing is to be you in the here and now as well. And the thing that spurred me on was I couldn't stand who I was in the here and now, and I never could ever in my entire life until I was who I was in the here and now. And that has made all the difference to me. And it didn't matter whether I was doing that at the age of 44 when I started transition or at the age of 70, which I will be on the 30th of November.
Yeah.
If the hearing, you know, you don't know how many days you have left. I knew that my days are numbered at the age of 44 if I couldn't be who I was.
Definitely.
That's kind of touching. I actually got a little bit tense there, like imagining the stress of that. Yeah. But for me, I think I'm a little bit lucky because I don't really have dysphoria. I just have this mild disgust at the idea of not experimenting. I guess that's maybe a lack of a better word there.
Sure, which is why I wanted to again reiterate that contrary to the thing, I see a lot of people online say something to the effect of cis people don't question their gender, and I don't really like that messaging personally. I think cis people ought to question their gender more and say what if, and just run down the thought experiment and how you feel. And I think for just like the stats would show, like 99% of people, they're going to be like, nope, that's right for me. And if it's not, then you'll know. But like, if you're having those feelings, it's perfectly possible that you are a cis man and there is nothing to be concerned about. But I think if there is something else there, I think you'll be happier having investigated it and put it to bed. And that way you can say, okay, no, I really investigated that thoroughly when those feelings came up. And now I don't have to worry about it because I know what's up for me. Well, we are going to have to move on and take... oh, wow, I just totally fucked this up.
All right, is Jimmy in there?
Oh,
Jimmy is not. I am producing and hosting at the same time. It's all me. I run this ship.
Well, give him a go fuck yourself for me.
Okay, will do. Thank you so much.
See you, Stephanie.
We'll talk to you soon.
Bye.
Bye.
Nice talking to you.
All right. I saw someone in the chat saying, don't encourage him. Literally, I was so careful to be like, I'm not telling you to transition at all.
Yeah.
People get so worked up over the silliest stuff. All right. We've still got more callers on the line. And they all actually sound pretty interesting. So next we have Jude in Georgia. Pronouns are he, him. Jude, you are live on the line. What do you have for us today?
Hello, beautiful people.
Hello.
Good afternoon. Yes.
Okay, I think it's kind of slow.
Yep, you're live. What's your topic?
Are you watching the show or listening to the show while you're calling in? Because if you don't want to do that, there is a delay.
No, I'm not.
Okay. So what's your question, Jude?
Well, my question is like, I actually don't understand why people identify as anything.
Okay.
Isn't it better if we just like do whatever we want, talk with whatever we want, and just move on?
Hmm. I hear what you're saying, and I would love to live in a society where people could just do whatever they wanted. If boys wanted to have breasts and long hair and wear women's clothes and not worry about it, then they could. But we don't currently live in that society. And there is a more complex psychological phenomenon going on here with trans people. We don't know, just like with lots of psychological, personally reported experiences, we don't necessarily know why someone is trans or why someone is depressed or why someone is yada, yada, yada. But what we do have are predictive models. When a person says they're trans and reports those trans feelings, we have predictive models of treatment that show that if this person says they're a trans woman, they're assigned male at birth, transition is going to be really great for them. Same for trans men and non-binary people. Having that access to care, documents that reflect their gender, improve their well-being, especially when minors are given access to age appropriate for affirming care. The purported increased risk of suicide and anxiety and depression all becomes level with all of their cisgender cohorts, their peers. So why does someone identify as trans? Well, that's more complicated. I don't think we're ever going to know that in any of our lifetimes, but we don't need to, because what we know is that people, generally speaking, deserve rights and dignity and respect, and people who benefit from transition should have access to transition. And I don't know why we would need to know any more than that.
No, I guess my question is like, sorry, go ahead.
Well, I just have a quick question, and that is, when you say identify, what do you mean by identify as? I mean, I'm
not saying.
This person identifies as something. What do you mean? What are you thinking when you say identify as?
I guess that's my question. Meaning that if we see sex as just a food, we don't identify as the food that we eat, right? We just eat and move on, and we eat another food whenever we want. So, I think identifying with a specific gender is actually not good for society in general. And I think the best way to be and have a free society is not even to have any type of identity, just live as your natural.
I'm sorry. I'm not trying to laugh at you. Also, I realize your collar banner is not up. Sorry, Jude. I'm not trying to laugh at you. Just when you say, I think society would be more free if we tell people that they can't be who they are, that is logically contradictory. You can't say it would be more free for people to not have the right to be who they are. That doesn't make any sense. It's like, it would be more free if I locked you up. Like, is this 1984? War is peace?
Arden,
it doesn't make any sense.
Arden is reading my mail, because that's where I was going down with that line of questioning.
Yeah, I'm not saying people shouldn't have the freedom to identify. So we should teach people that whatever you identify with doesn't have to be who you are. Like, it can be a free spirit and do whatever you want.
Jude, I'm sorry for over talking there. I thought you were done, but I should listen more carefully. Anyway, that's exactly what I'm saying. I don't identify as Stephanie. I am Stephanie. I don't identify as a trans woman. I am a trans woman. I don't identify as anything other than who I am. And I found a complete lack of any sort of identity in trying to pretend I was something I wasn't, or somebody I wasn't. That was, that's why I have this, that's why I have a bit of a love-hate relationship with the language of identification.
I guess what I'm saying is, by identifying as a specific gender or role, aren't we like creating another loop and like a division between
Jude, I think you're
each other?
confused, which is what Stephanie is trying to get at. When I'm saying I identify as a woman, I'm not telling you, I'm not making a declaration of I'm wearing the suit. I am putting on the woman hat. That's not what's happening. What's happening is I'm communicating to you the experience of who I am. And I think this is why Stephanie was saying maybe this is not the best word or the best language to communicate this concept. But what we're doing is simply communicating to you, regardless of what you expect based on maybe my sex assigned at birth, regardless of what you expect based on the gender roles you know in society, this is who I am. That's what I mean when I say I identify as a trans woman. I'm not telling you I'm putting on this hat because I belong in this group. It's not dividing lines. I'm trying to bridge a gap. I am quite literally, in using that word, trying to build a bridge to you to communicate to you my experience.
I guess my question is, why don't we do that? Let's say, do you say I identify as a cheeseburger? I feel like a cheeseburger. Why is
As a
it
what?
different for
That's
sex
what.
and others?
That's what exactly, Jude. That's what exactly what I mean. It's not the same. It's not. You're viewing the personality. You're viewing the person as an object. A cheeseburger is an object. It's a food. You eat the cheeseburger. One doesn't identify as a cheeseburger any more than one identifies as who you are, right? So, I mean, I don't understand. It's that, right. This is going into attack helicopter territory where it doesn't make any sense. It's just it's a ludicrous approach to say, well, if you think you can be this, which is a construct somebody else has made for you, right? You haven't made that construct for yourself because their idea of what a woman is isn't yours. So you can't, that's what I'm saying. I don't identify as me. I am me. And you're saying, well, you could just as easily identify as a cheeseburger. Seems a little ridiculous.
So are you saying if you are a trans and you detransition and be straight, are you saying you lost yourself because you're saying you are transgender?
No.
Or you identify as a transgender or not a transgender?
No. That's not what she's saying at all.
No.
And I had to say no a lot of times because, so I get people don't like when I interrupt like that. But the problem is, Jude, 2 seconds into that sentence, I knew where you were going and I was right because that's where you went. And I was already responding to that whole point because I knew where you were going and it was wrong. That's not what she's saying. If somebody comes out, by the way, I don't know if you know this, Jude, I transitioned, then detransitioned, and then transitioned again. I'm not saying that I lost myself and then found myself. I'm saying at all those stages, I was looking for the peace to be myself and to be okay with people to just look at me and to have their feelings and their judgments about me and to let it roll off my back and say whatever they think, that's their problem because I am me. I didn't have that peace as a kid, as a young person growing up. And I found that peace as an adult, which is why I finally transitioned again and said, you know what? At this point, if people think I am a man or they think whatever they think about me, that is okay. That is their prerogative to think that and to be wrong about me because I know who I am and I'm okay with that. I'm not communicating to you that I've assigned myself to a group or that, or saying that I was a man when I said I was a man and that I'm a woman when I say I'm a woman. I'm just trying to communicate to you who I am in my life experience. This is not wearing different hats. It's not like that. It's a very different phenomenon going on. And by the way, if you have a body of science that suggests that identifying as a cheeseburger reduces people's depression and that there is a phenomenon of people who consider themselves cheeseburgers and not being considered such causes them significant distress such that they're committing suicide at increased rates and have depression and anxiety and all these things at increased rates, then while I wouldn't understand it, I would be hard pressed to reject the body of science that supports the existence of those people. Yeah, these are not the same things at all. And trans people have that body of science. As we've talked about many times here, every major medical organization within the U.S. supports the existence of trans people and our access to gender-affirming care.
Right, but I guess my thing is that like the science is based on what's already in the society, and society is very key on what's your sex, what's your gender, and stuff like that. And other people obviously are gonna feel the need to associate with one group, whereas associating with cheeseburger, since nobody cares about that, it wouldn't be a problem. That's why we don't have the science. But what I'm saying is naturally we shouldn't have, like, we would have a better society if nobody makes the sex thing like a big deal.
Yes.
I would agree with you. I would totally agree with you, but unfortunately we don't. So let me finish. That puts trans people in a bit of a quandary. We don't have the problem. The problem is people not accepting us for who we are. And you can sit there and say for all the world, society would be better off, and I agree, it would be. So we're not trying, at least I'm not trying, I won't speak for everybody, but I'm not trying to demand anything of you except a little bit of respect for when I tell you who I am. Try to believe it, and I'll try to be there for it. Maybe the society would be better off if nobody gave a crap about gender, because then society would be providing trans people of all ages medical care.
Yeah. The position you're advocating for, Jude, has a name. It's so widely known and accepted that it has a name. It's called gender abolition. I'm a gender abolitionist. I support moving society in a direction that eliminates gender biases and expectations from the structures that our society is built in. But we don't live in that world, and trans people, as we just talked to a previous caller, are definitely not the people perpetuating the gender stereotypes in society. We are definitionally transgressing those expectations. The notion that because trans people exist, it sounds like your position is that somehow trans people are inhibiting the feminist utopia that you're advocating for, which is where gender just doesn't matter and everyone's empowered to do whatever. That's great. To get there, it's going to involve supporting trans people and validating trans identities, because we're the ones who are actually transgressing those boundaries.
Yeah, I'm not against the movement, but it's just a question anyway.
Sure.
But you gave me a good answer, and I'll think about that, and that's it.
Yeah.
That was
you can call back if you have more thoughts next week. Call back.
Yeah.
We'd love to hear
Absolutely.
what your updated thoughts are. So thank you for calling, Jude. We'll talk to you soon.
All right. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Jude.
I thought for a minute there that might get a little more hostile, but it was actually pretty civil. So that was good. Thank you, Jude.
Pretty cool.
All right. Keep it rolling. We've got another 4 callers on the line. Usually we take calls until about the 90-minute mark, so I think we can get to all of these calls. I might close the lines, meaning no new callers. So if you're on the lines currently, stay on the line. We're going to try to get to all of you. But excuse me for a minute while I do close those lines. So no more new callers. If anyone in the chat goes, I can't get a call, it's giving me a busy signal, that's why. But until then, we're going to take Tony in Utah. Tony, you are on the line. What's going on?
Hey,
Tony.
I am a repeat caller. It's been a number of weeks since I last called.
Okay.
I've had a lot of time to think about the talk that we had. And I've since talked with, I have a trans friend who just began her transition. And I've been introduced sort of to the community and to a lot of people. And I have a question about what the binary is and what the distinction between a non-binary person and transgender person is.
Interesting. Well, I'd like to get to your first question. Oh, sorry. I realized. Go ahead, Steph. I realized the last caller banner is still up. Oh,
Yeah,
no, it's not. Sorry, it's hard to do this.
I was okay. You're going to go to first question first. I was going to go to second question. So
me too, actually. Oh no, I was going to go to second question first because I think it's kind of arbitrary a little bit. I know plenty of non-binary people who don't consider themselves trans.
Right, and I know some who do, and you know, for myself, and I'm not gonna, you know, I don't make it a practice to define people. They can define themselves, but for myself, my thinking about non-binary is my thinking about trans, or the way that prefix has evolved in terms of talking about sex and gender, is trans means you don't identify with, you don't feel comfortable with the sex you were assigned at birth. And so you prefer to conduct your life, your etc. in a mode that's either not in conformity in physiognomy or behavior with the sex that was assigned at birth. You know, the sex / gender, the whole cluster of sex and gender that means. That's what the prefix means to me. But that doesn't mean that it has to mean the same thing to everybody.
Yeah, I think I'm similar. It's obviously, I would not tell someone you have to identify as trans if you're non-binary. I'm not going to do that. But what I will say is that, to me, if you don't identify with the sex you were assigned at birth, if you were assigned female and you don't identify as a woman, you are definitionally trans in my eyes. But if you tell me I don't consider myself trans, I'm not going to like have a fight with you and tell you that you are trans or anything like that. That is how I view the concept. And then the first question was, what is the gender binary? Is that right?
Yeah. Really quick, if I could just comment on what you have said so far. So, the way that I've kind of viewed like non-binary people, and the way that it's sort of like constructed in my head, is it's anybody who doesn't conform to what is, to me, an incredibly strict binary. Like, to me, in my head, almost nobody would be binary. You'd have, you know, like your hyper masculine, like Eddie Halls or something on one side, and then to me, it seems unattainable on both sides. So the binary has always really confused me, which is the main question that I asked.
Yeah.
And then, so to me, it seems like non-binary is anything that isn't that, right?
Yeah. I do think it becomes tricky, though, because I agree with you in the sense that the idealized concept that sort of binary genders encompass are so unattainable that it kind of makes everyone non-binary in some sense. Although I struggle with that because I very much so experience the world as a woman and consider myself a woman. Like when I go out in the public, I am absolutely treated like a woman by strangers. And so it seems weird for me to be like, because nobody is a perfect man or a perfect woman, that I'm non-binary. Like I would not feel comfortable identifying myself that way, if that makes sense. But I do agree in principle with the notion that the gender binary entails stereotypes that are so unattainable that everyone kind of becomes non-binary in a certain sense. Which is, I think, kind of, we're doing a lot of gender abolition talk today, I think is kind of an extension of this sort of gender abolitionist worldview of a world where sex and gender stereotypes don't entail anything of people in society. And I definitely, I've said this several times before, where I think it's more of like a good compass to move society in a direction that liberates people from those expectations. But I also am not convinced that it is like an actually attainable place that we can get to, maybe I'm wrong. I would love to be proven wrong. Like Star Trek, fully automated luxury gay space communism. Let's go. But you know, I do think it's perhaps unrealistic to think that we're going to reach such a future in any of our lifetimes, and probably even a couple generations if humans survive the next couple generations because of climate change. So yeah, it is an interesting topic, though. I mean, the binary seems so clearly defined, and I know trans women and trans men who are consider themselves binary will often very cleanly put ourselves, I'm a binary trans woman, or I'm a binary trans man. But I would also agree with you that there is sort of a sense where nobody fits that, and you could probably make a case that everyone is non-binary in some sort of sense.
All right. What? Really quick, just to get back, you said something that made me laugh. I was on mute. What did you call Star Trek?
Fully automated luxury gay space communism. I've not watched a lot of Star Trek. My partner is a huge Trekkie. All of our friends are huge Trekkies. I've watched Strange New Worlds and Picard and some of the newer ones because it's a little bit easier for me to get into with having like more modern production value. But I do like the world, and I get why people call it that. It is very much a world that is advocating for, you know, equality and growth and like human cooperation and interspecies cooperation, because I guess that's not everyone's human in that show, but yeah.
I will have to. I've never watched Star Trek. My dad watches it, but I've never seen it.
I'll say the newer stuff is really good. I really liked Strange New Worlds. I thought it was phenomenal.
Yeah.
All right. And then I think it was the first question I asked, maybe it was the second, was what, so you mentioned binary trans women, binary trans man.
Mm-hmm.
Just really quick, I want to just dive into that a little bit, because to me, if you're transgender, that seems like a pretty stout rejection of the binary, like you mentioned.
Yeah.
And I guess it would be like you. So I know that like non-binary is such a huge term. So I have one friend. He has last week he came out to me as non-binary, but he didn't say non-binary. He called it void gender, and then he showed me a bunch of memes, and it was really incredibly confusing. And I think that's on purpose.
Yeah.
And I tried to dive into it, but it was it just it's impossible to tell when he's joking and when he's not.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure he was serious. He's an entire can of worms, but so I have a hard time wrapping my head around binary trans woman or binary trans man as opposed to them just being non-binary. I guess it would just be that they are like, I am socially female or socially a woman. I don't know how to.
Yeah,
I'm bad with this sort of stuff.
I think if you think of gender as a spectrum, bimodal distribution, etc., it's something a continuum of things, and then you'll have the concept of male on one end of it, and you'll have the concept of female on the other end of it. However you choose to define those terms and make them work for you. And then you'll have people that are sliding somewhere in the middle. So if you feel, if one feels strongly and perceives oneself strongly as fitting in towards the female end of the spectrum, that's what I would call a binary. It's like it's taking the spectrum and using the ends or somewhere close to the ends as reflecting a person whose sense of themselves isn't somewhere in the middle.
Yeah.
At least that's what I mean. I don't know if does that make sense?
I think It does with me. And I will confess, Tony, you're absolutely right that I have said multiple times today that inherently being a trans woman, even a binary trans woman, is inherently transgressive of the accepted gender system. And I don't disagree with that. But yeah, I think it's kind of like, have you seen the graphs where they're talking about differences in male and female brain anatomy in certain areas? And what you'll see is, your X and Y axis, and then you have these like boxes with like ranges in them. I feel like the binary end is sort of like a little box of a range on that graph. They're like, there's a little wiggle room in there. There's almost like a spectrum within the spectrum kind of an idea, if that makes sense. And I think that, but I mean, it's also just like experientially, like I've told this story before about how I went to Tractor Supply Company a couple weeks ago with my partner and started loading up these 40-pound bags of animal bedding into our truck. And this customer or this employee comes and pushes me aside and goes, "I've got this, ma'am," and does it for me. Like my experience in the world is that of a woman, and it's not really in the middle. My experience is very clearly anchored on one side of like the gender spectrum. And just even though your, perceptions and experience don't necessarily indicate your identity, but for me, they do. So I don't know. Does that make sense? I think also you're probably going to get different answers from other people.
Yeah, I've noticed the more that I talk with people who are in the community about it, the more different answers that I get, and they all seem equally valid in that I have a hard time understanding it. If that makes sense.
To your point, also, I've met someone who was void gender, and I might not personally understand. Like, I understand non-binary. That's not hard for me to understand. I have a hard time wrapping myself around void gender, but that doesn't mean I think it's like invalid or that somebody can't identify that way. It's more of just like, I think it's okay to not get it, and to like, I don't have to get everyone, like I can be like, hey, I don't get it, but if you're living your best life, you're not hurting anybody, and like, good for you. I'm not trying to police how other people inhabit their life,
Yeah, that's something I've definitely embraced, is that I don't get it, and there's some things I think I'm not going to, like void gender. I don't think I'm ever going to understand that. If he's real, well, I guess if they're really, I don't even know. If void self is void gender, I don't know what you'd call it. They're really into the
neopronouns. Is that what you're gonna?
They're getting into it, but I don't know which one it is, because what is a neopronoun? Is it just like whatever they come up with?
I mean, yes and no. Like, I think there are some accepted neopronouns. I think it's just any pronoun that differs from the standard ones we have in the English language, which is he, she, they. Which I think that could make a conversation about neopronouns. I think would be really interesting, and I've been kind of waiting for someone to call in and talk about it, but nobody has yet on the show. We have maybe had a couple conversations, but not the ones I'm looking for. So we'll see. Maybe that'll come up in the near future because I've said it out loud. I've invoked it.
I will call it. I'll call in next week.
Okay, deal.
And we'll talk about it, because that interests me a lot.
Yeah, no, that'd be great. I'd love to hear it.
I have one final question, and then I think you two have done really well answering all my questions.
Well,
I know
thanks,
I'm
Tony.
super all over the place.
What's up?
So earlier in the call, you mentioned that cis people should question their gender.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to know, like, what does that look like? Because I remember when I was young, I would get bullied. My brother was 6 years older than I am, and I'm still super short. I'm 5'4". I'm excited to see the comments on this video about that. But he could throw me around. He's 6'8" now. He played college football, and I was, like a paper bag to him. And I remember thinking to myself when I was really, really young that I wouldn't be treated like this if I was a girl. Is that questioning your gender?
I think that can lead to questioning your gender in a sense. I don't know if that is one way or another. I think it could be, and it might also not be. Like, this wouldn't happen to me if I was a girl. Seems like a great place to like be the inception of questioning about your gender, because that seems like a first awareness of like men and women are treated differently in society, and the treatment I am facing right now is a result of that. And I think that is a big part of what questioning your gender is. Like, I remember growing up with my friends and being like very much wanting to be a girl, but we'd play like Pokemon, right? Where you get to pick your gender. Back in like the first one where you could do that, Pokemon Crystal, and being like, wow, well, if you could pick to be a girl, would you do it? And kind of be like testing the water, be like, am I the only one who feels this way? And like all of my friends clearly had crossed their mind before, because they had an answer. Like they were like, some of them were like, oh, I would do it for a day as long as I could go back, or no way, I like being a boy. Like I think it clearly had occurred to them before. And I think it's pretty normal for kids to kind of observe these differences and to speculate about them.
It is. I mean, it's clearly been a topic of fiction. It's not like the idea is one of the oldest myths in the world. You can go back and read Hesiod, and you'll find out about Tiresias, right? Mm-hmm. How did it go? Zeus got mad. Oh, yeah. Hera got mad at him, turned him into a woman. Zeus got mad at him, turned him back into a man, and then people were quizzing him. Where do you go with that? So the ancient Greeks were talking about this stuff back in the day too. So I think people do either question or speculate or write fiction or get down with it. I think that maybe. For people who are trans, they delve pretty deep into the topic because it's deep within them that there's something that needs dealing with for them in a special way that doesn't really acutely affect people that don't have that feeling.
With that said, Tony, we do got to move on. We've got 3 other callers. I'd like to get to them all, even though we're kind of really pushing it against the wire here. So, but we'd love to hear from you again. I'd love to talk about neopronouns and stuff. So definitely call back in the future.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Sorry I took up so much time.
No, you're fine. Have a good day. Bye.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Let's keep rolling. This next one might be a little spicy. We'll see where he goes. We've got Zachary in Georgia. Pronouns are he, him. Zachary, you're live on the line. What's going on?
Hey, can you hear me?
Yep.
Gotcha, Zachary.
Hey, how are you?
Doing well.
Great. What's up?
So I was just calling. I've been I've grown up Republican my whole life, and I don't even know like anything about what that means. I don't do politics or anything. I never really worried about that in school. I'm a math and physics kind of guy, not really a political kind of guy or anything like that. But my parents, they watch Fox News consistently, like 24/7 consistently. Mm. They worship Trump and all that kind of stuff. And I always grew up, basically believing whatever they believed until I hit, college kind of age. And I'm just wondering, like, the way I grew up was trans people are mentally ill and they need to be hospitalized and medicated and all this kind of stuff. And that's what I always grew up to believe. Now that I used to be heavily religious with them. Now I'm not religious at all. I'm a agnostic atheist. So, I mean, I'm changing my views a whole lot about a whole lot in life. And, I'm still young, so I'm trying to change my views about this because I just want to treat everybody with the respect that they deserve. I just don't understand anything about it except for what they told me, which is they're mentally ill.
Sure. So I think one of the first places to start is like, what is a mental illness? And a mental illness is usually going to be something that causes clinically significant impairment in your ability to have a job, to have relationships, to live a functional life, right? And being trans in and of itself, when I'm in a community of people who don't like my partner. Like, my gender is not a thing that comes up like a lot in just our normal day-to-day life. Like, it might in specific instances, but it's really just, I'm just a person. We don't, like, I think most cis people, it's the same. You don't think about your gender that much when you're just going about your day-to-day life. Transness in and of itself isn't inhibiting my ability to work or to have a normal life. What does inhibit my ability to have a normal life and what does cause me distress and depression is when I, like, for example, when I was a teenager, I tried applying for a job. I was openly trans as a teenager before I detransitioned, and I didn't get the job and was specifically told that having a trans person at the front of the retail counter would potentially drive away customers as opposed to the rest of what their teenage people who work there. Like, that kind of stuff makes me depressed because it's like, oh, the nature of me existing in this place, even though I'm trying to just do the same job as everyone else, is going to be a problem for people. People are going to be mad and stop shopping with the business that I would potentially work for because I'm trans, a thing over which I have no control. Those are the things that cause impairment in my life. It's not being trans, it's people's prejudice and their bigotry that causes impairment. And this is acknowledged by the DSM, the Accepted Diagnostic Statistical Manual for Mental Illnesses in the US. They acknowledge that while gender incongruence can cause somebody distress experientially, like it's distressful to a trans woman to start growing facial hair, being trans itself, the nature of being trans, just like the nature of being gay itself, doesn't necessarily cause distress. It's everything that surrounds it that causes this distress. So it definitionally does not meet the requirements to be a mental illness as is used for every other mental illness in society. Does that make sense?
Right. That makes perfect sense. And what I try to tell them is, because I try to say, when I come up to them and talk to them, it's usually like it blows up anytime I bring up like, I'm not political. I don't know anything about the left or right, like what those terms mean or anything like that. But like anytime I bring something up that is not what they believe in, I get yelled at. Anything about atheism makes literally my grandmother cry, like straight to my face. Like, it breaks my heart. So I try to say, like, I just sit there and I listen to them, and I try to smile and nod, but I want to get up and tell them basically what you said is, it's not an illness in my eyes, but when people talk about them like that and do stuff like that with them, like verbally, just how they go about their day-to-day lives, it just seems like that depression that you're talking about, that's the mental illness. Like, that's what you're talking about. That's where the problems arise, is the stuff that, like, the people that I've been raised to come up has been, like, problematic because we're causing depression and that's the mental illness, rather than just trying to help them understand, who they are better. Which, I mean, I don't even know if that sounds bigoted or not, because I don't know if they already know what they understand. Like, I don't know anything about it. I'm just a cis straight white male. So
no, that's
like, I need to do more research, definitely.
No, that was very thoughtful of you, not bigoted at all. And
Absolutely.
like, I think it's I lost my train of thought. Steph, you have thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, Arden, you did a great job explaining that. That there are conditions in the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual version 5 that are often associated with trans people, and one of them is dysphoria, which is a fundamental discomfort with your gender as assigned at birth, or various aspects of your life, and some of them are socially reinforced, and those things can be alleviated. There's so that's the diagnostic criteria that are used in providing gender affirming care. For example, this person has dysphoria. We want to alleviate that dysphoria. How best can we do it? And over the course of the last 50 years, we've figured out ways of alleviating that dysphoria, and the most effective way is some form of gender affirming care. Mm-hmm. So when it comes to, yes, I mean, people are distressed by their condition, but once that distress is alleviated, go on to live perfectly normal lives, whether they transition or whether they don't. They figure it out somehow or another. So, but once they're sorted, they're just going along. I mean, nobody. Frankly, nobody. Very few people in the sailing world know I'm trans, except for the people that either knew me before or the people that say, "Hey, we've got to get a trans person in to talk about if we are going to make decisions about how U.S. sailing and world sailing is going to approach this issue on the larger scale." So that's all. It doesn't matter to me. I might have other problems, but being trans ain't one of them.
Yeah. Like for me, me and my partner breed reptiles, love snakes, and we go to reptile expos all the time. And one thing that I love about reptile expos is that it's one of the few places where people of every political affiliation really kind of get dumped in a melting pot, and we are all there just about the snakes and the reptiles. Nobody really cares about the external politics of it all, right? But that being said, there are big conventions, one that's coming up, Animal Con USA, where all of the like most notable creators who do animal related content are going, and it's taking place in Florida. And while being a reptile breeder and interacting in the community has not caused me distress, because being trans has nothing to do with reptiles, what does cause me distress is I can't participate in one of the biggest events because it's in Florida, and I'm afraid of getting arrested for trying to piss in a public bathroom.
Yeah.
Like, that causes me distress, not being trans. If somebody thinks I'm a man, I don't care. You're entitled to think my eyes are purple, and that I'm a man, and that I'm actually 7'2". You're entitled to be wrong about a lot of things, but I don't care about that. What I care about is that I'm impeded from just living my life. I would love to just be able to breed reptiles and to not talk about being trans and to not care that I'm trans, but I'm inhibited from that because society is structured to oppress trans people and to have these prejudiced views about trans people and to not consider those things when they're picking where to put a convention that's like huge for the community. It's being trans is not a mental illness, and it's not difficult to be trans. Straight cis people make it difficult, and a lot of times not even intentionally. It's like you're pointing out, Zachary. You're just the way you get brought up. A lot of people, they don't mean to think these awful things about people. They're just like, this is what I was told, and I just never really investigated it that deeply. And it has a downstream effect on us, unfortunately. But, that's why we do things like this show, to hopefully try to connect some people to some information and to see our faces and hear our voices and know that I'm not trying to advocate for you to force you to think something or to force you to do something. I'm just trying to advocate for whatever you think and do to not have any effect on my ability to live my life.
Right. That's beautiful. I love that. I have one more question if I can. I try to make it real quick. So I know you guys have other people on the line, but it's kind of like really important to me.
Go for it.
Okay. All right. So I have a 6-year-old, a 2-year-old, and a newborn. And like I said, my grandparents and my parents are like always on Fox News, and they're very, I guess, bigoted would be the word towards all this stuff. They don't understand anything. They don't want to learn anything about this. But like, how can I guess, do better to, let them know that this is a thing and that, they don't even need to really think too much about it, but just to understand that this is how people feel without, like, I guess them wanting to bring it up to my grandparents or anything like that. Like, I don't want it to be like the main thing in their head to something to look out for or something like that. Like, this person's different. Like, but I would like to explain to them that this is a thing out here,
Mm-hmm. Steph, you have thoughts?
That's a tough one to think on. I never had kids. I have a great number of nieces, nephews, and going down the road. But thinking of what to say. I don't know I think whatever you do, it has to be age appropriate, and it's sort of one of those questioning things. I think what you do is you teach your children to be tolerant, to be comfortable in asking you questions, any questions that they might have, and if you can you want them to feel most comfortable coming to you and asking them. And asking those difficult questions, so that you are the person that is conveying the notion of, well, honey, this is the way some people are. They're just people like you and your brothers and sisters, and they're fine. Yes, you can play with them. No, they won't bite you. Whatever it is, but I'm not sure that there's when a child is a bit older and is hearing the nonsense that is this is another thing that's rather disturbing. If speaking of watching Fox News the entire time, the kids are going to run across that stuff. You want them to be asking you, Daddy, what is this?
Right.
What is this stuff? And if they do go to your parents or your partner's parents, and they get that, well, these people are mentally ill, you can say, and they come to you and say, Daddy, Grandma says trans people are mentally ill. You can have that conversation with them at that point in time. Well, people
right.
used
That's
to
what I
think
had to do with atheism. And
yeah.
I think
it's one of the things
same
where
idea.
it's like they told me, or they told my kids something like that. I got a tattoo the other day, and they told something that Daddy's going to hell and all that, and he doesn't know what the hell any of that is. And he came to me and asked me about it. I'm like, I got pissed off and went over there and had a long conversation. But, when he comes by, and says something like
that's
that,
the conversation you really need to have, is with your parents. Hey, don't do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, no shit. It's like you can be a grandparent, but you're not the parent. Period. Like I don't like you keep your views and your stuff to yourself, and if you want to watch them and laugh with them, play with them, you're always happy. You're welcome over to my house and have fun, or I'm gonna come over there and you guys have fun and play with them. But keep your views to yourself. Like they don't need to know anything about this kind of stuff at their age. They need to go be kids and have fun and live their lives. But with the Fox News, like you said, running on repeat, I'm just worried they're gonna come to them before they're able to get to me, and I'm like.
Well,
I guess with the whole atheism talk, I'm more knowledgeable about that. It's just like me telling them that, don't worry about any of that. They can make up their own mind later on in life, all this kind of stuff. I've been teaching them, a bunch of people think a bunch of different things, but with the whole transgender thing and LGBTQ, I'm just not educated enough. And I guess that's an error on my part, and I need to get educated so I can explain that later on in life.
I don't think it's necessarily an error, but I'll say I think something you can do that kind of undermines a lot of that is kids are already pre-programmed to kind of think whatever their parents say is like gospel. Forgive me for using that term, but it's just an evolutionary trick. We very much depend on our parents for knowledge and information, and I think something you can do that will undermine a lot of that information is just passive comments like, if your sons, falls and gets hurt and cries, rather than being like, stop crying, what are you, a little girl? Be like, just try a different approach. Like, not undermining gender, or, don't reinforce gender expectations in that situation. Like, if your kid wants to play with a doll, don't be like, oh, what are you, like a sissy trying to play with a doll? Just be like, hey, look, sometimes some boys like dolls. I want you to know that this is transgressive and that some other kids might make fun of you for it. But I support you because I love you, and if you want to play with dolls, that's totally cool with me.
And speaking of dolls, when we had my newborn, my wife and I brought up, like, we're going to bring a doll over to my nanny's house so he can play with them and feel like, that she's there, and, he has his own little doll, so he's not all up in her face. Mm-hmm. And they threw a whole fit saying boys don't play with dolls. Boys don't play with dolls, and he's not going to be able to play. Just leave it in the car. I'm like, well, it's literally something for comfort, but they're so indoctrinated into their brain that I can't communicate anything to them. Like, it doesn't matter what I say.
Yeah, I empathize with that struggle deeply, but I do think that if you just kind of keep doing what you're doing and just kind of try to just pull apart those sort of expectations that they're going to get from your parents, and just kind of reinforce that, like, hey, if you're a boy, you can play with a doll. Hey, if you're a girl and you want to play with trucks, that's okay. You know, other people might think something about it, but here in this house, we love and support you because who you are is what matters to me, and more that you're happy and healthy, not that you fit some mold. Those kids are going to turn out fine, and whether or not they're trans or queer, they're going to be affirming, loving, much healthier individuals on the basis of knowing that they have a supportive dad who's going to be there for them no matter how they turn out. That said, Zach, we do have to get onto these other callers because we are pushing it on the wire. But thank you for calling. This is I thought this was going to be a way more contentious conversation. So thank you for this.
Zach, so thanks so much for calling. That was a great conversation, and good luck with your kids and your parents. I hope you are hope for the future as well.
Certainly.
I appreciate that. Thank you guys so much for taking on a call. And if Jimmy, you ever listen to this call, you can go fuck yourself. Love you very much. Y'all have a great night.
Thanks, Zachary. Bye.
Thanks.
All right. I think we had 2 more, but one of them dropped. But that's as unfortunate as it is. That's probably better for time. So, last call of the day. Let's pull in Violet. Their pronouns are they and she in British Columbia. Violet, you are on the line. What's going on?
Hi. How's it going? I'm doing good.
Yeah, what do you want to talk about today?
Okay, so for the longest time, women were not tested on for medicine. Mm-hmm. I believe the same problem is still happening, but for intersex people, non-binary people, and trans people, because almost all of the research that is done, especially on trans people, is almost exclusively in gender and sexuality itself. But then there's hardly any research going on when it comes to, for example, drug responses that are known to be sex and gender-based, and oftentimes doctors will conflate the two, which means that knowing whether it is actually based on what hormone levels you have or what sex you have or some other factor that might impact the drug response, there's almost no research on that. And I'm wondering, why do you think that, like, it's not like there's a lack of scientists that are trans affirming. There's plenty of trans research, but it's almost exclusively seemingly targeted on us existing as trans people.
Yeah.
Like, why do you think that hasn't really, as far as I'm aware, I'm happy to be proven wrong, but as far as I'm aware, like, there's, like, even HRT itself is still considered off-label, at least in Canada and the US, as far as I know.
Yeah.
So if that is still off-label, why is it that, like, medicine isn't catching up to the social progress we have in science as a whole?
I mean, I hate to give the obvious answer, but it seems clearly prejudice. I think there's also the added factor of, you know, trans people in multiple countries are under an, like, unprecedented assault on our rights and our access to these basic things like medication. And as a result of that, I think probably a lot of researchers feel that while they might like to do a study like that, because genuinely, that had never occurred to me before you brought that up, that medicine could, like, there could be radically different interactions with medicines just from trans people as a group. And I would love to see that kind of research, but I think I'm just speculating here because I don't actually know. I would imagine that the people who have the ability to research trans people probably feel like it's a more pressing issue to conclusively, like, reiterate, yes, we see again, trans people are real. Again, there are lower rates for surgeries. Again, trans minors getting access to things, improve their health outcomes and reduce risk of suicide and depression. Although this has all been done before and it really shouldn't require more than we have.
It shouldn't have required more in the 1920s, but it was still enough for Hitler to decide to burn the one place that was actually studying this. So if it wasn't enough data then, I don't know if, like, I understand what you're saying, and I agree that might be the mindset people have, but I feel like that's a very naive mindset because we've had almost a century of research on that, but hardly any research on, you know, does being trans impact your likelihood to get schizophrenia or your likelihood to, I don't know, have allergies, like just basic things like it. And it frustrates me because I know, like, even with cis women getting birth control tested on cis women by doctors was a controversial thing up until I think the 2000s. And like to this day, we still don't actually have very many studies that are done explicitly towards women beyond on things involving comparing them to men in terms of like gender and sexuality. So I know it's not just a trans issue, but it's just like it makes me frustrated that that's still like you would hope that the scientific community would be more progressive, generally speaking, than the average community, because they would be more like financially incentivized to get this right. But in practice, it feels like the like, at least in terms of the research, is just not going very far.
Yeah.
I'm going to say something that might be controversial. I think that don't think that there's that much incentive for particularly pharmaceutical companies to study trans people. It's low reward, high risk as far as they're concerned, which is why I always chuckle when people who are trans averse make a big deal out of that. The transing of the world is all a plot of Big Pharma. It's why the hell would Big Pharma even care?
Big Pharma still hasn't made HRT on label, so
yeah,
right.
No, I think that's so true, Stephanie. I hadn't even thought about that.
I mean, how often have we applied for more than absurd?
How often have we applied for like one of our gender affirming surgeries, and they're well demonstrated to be efficacious in what we're getting them for, and still insurance companies deny access to that. Like, so yeah, it's clear that Big Pharma has no incentive to actually do the right thing for trans people, because that means that's going to be spending more money for them. I don't want to get into a conspiratorial of a mindset, because I don't know if it's necessarily like a...
I don't believe it's malice. It's usually ignorance, and it's usually, like you said, you hadn't thought that was a thing that occurred until someone mentioned it to you. So I'm firmly in the opinion that the vast majority of doctors, even people that in theory are transforming, might just not have realized that's a thing that needs to be done, because it's not something that directly affects them. Like, I know... like doing disability advocacy, ableism has a lot of the same problems, where people just don't realize something is inaccessible until someone points it out. Like people putting accessibility door buttons in a place that obviously no one could really easily bring a wheelchair in to press the button in the first place. But like the specifications say just put a button by the door and you've succeeded the specifications. They never think of why are the specifications put in place. So I think it's something similar with trans healthcare, probably. That's rather than it being some outright conspiracy, because I think a conspiracy implies that people have more power in the system than they actually do, when in reality it's actually avoiding the fact that the system itself is usually the problem. So I tend to be against conspiracies for that reason, but I do think it's entirely possible that as it is, there's literally anti-trans research in some countries. Like drug research is prohibited. I know in certain places research explicitly on gender minorities, especially if they're literally legally criminalized from existing, there's not going to be research done on a group that literally can't legally exist in public. So.
Yes, if you disappear the people, then you can't really research them. That was the other thing I was going to bring up. There are probably quite a few trans people that would be very hesitant to get involved in a trial of any sort because of the way the medical community has treated us over time.
Right. As it is, I mean, it also totally makes sense to me that, like, when places like Florida literally are making lists of all the trans people that have ever even contacted gender affirming services in any way, shape, or form, I totally understand the genocidal issue of having any sort of registry of someone as trans on paper, especially on a published paper, could be an issue. I mean, like, I would still argue then that's why we need anonymous studies. Like, there are like arguments that we should have anonymous studies in general anyways, because having people have to give their own name in a study in order for the study to be respected, to me just seems like an unnecessary step compared to just having other other doctors in other places repeat the trial and see if they get the same results. Like that.
Sure. I will
to me,
say, I
makes more sense.
actually took part in a study just a couple weeks ago, and from what I remember from being in school, it is typically standard practice that even if they take your name, they do redact it, but that doesn't mean the government can't get their hands on that list of names or whatever. I do think I think it's a mix of kind of all the issues. I think the priority thing is one of them, and I think the incentivizing is another big aspect of it. But yeah, I think it's probably the case that we could do a lot of better medicine if we were able to really look at these things. But instead, I mean, and this is like the cultural problem of the moment, right? There are so many things going on that are so much more important than a lot of these issues.
J.K. Rowling was in the
burning
news
up,
next to Putin declaring war on another country.
Yeah.
Like literally Putin's comparing it to the trans issue itself said so much of how overblown this entire culture war is the world over at this point, as far as I'm concerned.
But I appreciate you bringing this topic up because I think it is an interesting conversation. I wish I could know more, but I think it's good to have this now banging around in, the heads of everyone in the audience, thinking about like kind of like things that we should be able to do and should be able to care about that we're inhibited from doing for a lot of reasons. And, hopefully that motivates people to push towards progress a little bit more vociferously.
There's another host on this show, but rather frequently, who might have some insight on that.
Yeah. Well, I would love to continue. Yeah, I would love to continue this conversation, Violet, but we are like 22 minutes past when we're supposed to stop taking calls, so I think I'm gonna have to let you go.
That was my main question, just because I was curious if you'd had any other insight, if there was some other reason why this research isn't being done. Because, like, for all I know, there could be like standards that require male and female to be listed or something like that that's more systemic that I just wasn't aware of. But
I don't think there's standards, but I will say there was, when I was in school, research methods was a big focus of mine. I loved reading and writing academic papers, and we talked a lot about how male and female shouldn't be the only two categories, but unfortunately it's difficult because it's complex. When you're working with broad populations, sometimes that actually works better, but on an individual level, it can also inhibit things. And then when we're talking about, trans people as a population, it probably would benefit us to look at those populations more broadly as well. But it's not really as much of standard as much, or a standard of practice in the sense of like a formal one, as much as just it's what has been done and what is the easiest to do because it's what has been done. But yeah, anyway, thank you, Violet. We do have to move on, but I appreciate you calling in. I'm sorry it was a relatively short call for how long you waited on the line, but I appreciate you bringing it up.
No worries. It was a good conversation. I learned a lot of things to look into further. So.
Sure. Thank you so much. We'll talk to you later, Violet.
Thank you, Violet. Bye.
All right. So that is the end of the caller portion of the show. I have a few little things to do before we get on to our super chats. We are going to read all super chats over $5 or more. So, if you would like to send us money, keep us fed and taken care of here on the line, we would love to read out your messages, and we appreciate your support. I also need to go plug all our stuff again. So remember, this is the best show on the line, objectively. I mean, this was an amazing show we just had today, and best conversations I've heard in weeks. So best show on the line, but if you really have nothing else to do, you're like just absolutely deprived of other opportunities. You could watch the Sunday show with Jimmy and Matt this Sunday at 2. You could watch Skep Talk on Monday at 6 p.m. Central Time with John Gleason and Josh Bowen. That's Dr. Josh Bowen. So maybe there'll be some interesting like biblical history conversations there. I love when Josh Bowen talks. Tuesday, we've got Dying Out Loud, Dave Warnock, and no guest confirmed. No guest confirmed for Matt on the Hang Up this Wednesday, and no host confirmed for Takis next week. But we'll have all that information probably by the time either a Sunday show or Skep Talk rolls around, so that you guys can prepare for your week. And of course, patreon.com/calltheline. That is the most direct and efficient way to support this network here. That's how we intend on getting, eventually LineCon and a community facility we would love to get up going here in Austin sometime, because everything is online now, and it would be really nice to get some more community facilities active where people can actually come together in person, because I think we could all use a little bit of that. With that said, Stephanie, are you ready to read some super chats?
Oh, let's go ahead and do that.
All right. You want to take the first one? Oops. That's like 4 weeks ago's counter. Let me fix that.
Oh, what is up with that?
Well, that's the thing that I'm supposed
All
to
right,
fix before we start the show, and I didn't.
Oh, well, you know.
Oh.
Must have been one of them snakes got into it.
Yep.
$20 from Jason Jones, straight white male here, 40 years old. If I could have a womb transplanted, I would do it. I would believe in anything you wanted if I could have my own children. I've wanted kids since I met my sister.
Wait, what? I wanted kids since I met my sister? Oh, okay. Maybe that means when your sister was born.
Yeah,
I thought there was a weird, like, incesty thing going on there, and I was like,
no,
what the fuck?
Wait, I don't know.
Thank you very much, Jason Jones. I think I get the message. No incest there. Appreciate it. We've got $4.99 from Claire. # Team Stephanie. But Arden, go Jimmy yourself. I will, just because you told me to.
Do we have a challenge?
So
challenge? I'll handle snakes. You come sailing. How's that?
That could be fun. Don't know when we'll ever get that. That's the problem with the challenges is it's hard to coordinate to make them happen. I'm always. I know. I don't want people to feel like we're getting them to donate money for a challenge that's not going to happen. You know what I mean? That's always my fear with this kind of thing. I would love to make them happen, and I love the honor of the brawl of who wins. But it's hard to commit to the challenge. We don't have it's difficult. Everyone on the line does like 5 other things, and it's really difficult for us all to find time to make it work.
Exactly. No, it's not going to work. $5 from Laser Lizard. 2 weeks post-op from FFS today. Catching a live show and getting to ride my motorcycle again on the same day makes a good day. Also, Team Sneck.
Ooh, congrats on the FFS. Also, I love red-eyed crocodile skinks. That's the lizard in their profile picture. Red-eyed crocodile skinks are so cute. You should Google them. They're adorable.
Right.
All right, we've got $9.99 from John Doan. Hello, my question is, do I say hello ladies when I approach and introduce myself to more than one trans woman? It might be that I'm overthinking myself. Your friend, Atheist Punk John, hugs. This is a complicated kind of thing. Part of me thinks, if this were some future paradigm, right, where we have gender abolition, then just assuming people are ladies, probably not a good move. Given the current society that we live in, I don't find it problematic to walk up to someone and say, to a group and say, hey, ladies. And if one of them goes, oh, actually, I'm not a lady, then you can just be like, oh, I'm so sorry. I did not mean to offend. I made an assumption in my bad. But like...
See, this is the funny thing about genders and gendered language. It's like nobody would even think twice. You walk up to her, hey, guys, how's it going?
Right. That's true. But hey, ladies, we have a lot of thoughts about
Hey, ladies. Good night, ladies. Oh, whatever.
I will say I do prefer as a trans woman being lumped in. Like, it's hard. Maybe you relate to this stuff. I've had a few times where, like, people have asked my pronouns, and I didn't hear them ask anyone else their pronouns. And so I was like, well, that feels terrible. Part of me wants to be like, I appreciate that you are aware enough of gendered issues that you can think to ask that question. And I appreciate that there are people for whom they wish somebody would just ask them their fucking pronouns for once. However, as a trans woman in a space when nobody else has inquired about their pronouns, it feels very much like, hey, I think you're a man who's trying to be a woman. Can you confirm or deny? That's what it feels like to me. So I kind of prefer the assumption sometimes.
Spanish. Yeah, exactly. Agreed. $5 from Samantha Shepard. Thank you for the show. You are welcome, Samantha.
Thank you very much, Samantha. Then we've got 500 Czech Korunas, it's a pink one, which how much is that? Hold on, before we read this, let's convert this. Oh, it's 22.53. Okay, cool. Thank you very much, Naresh. I forgot about the show tonight for a while, but I caught up. So yay. Also, pretty respectful, honest callers today. Wow. Yeah. Hashtag Team Arden. Thank you. And if the science shows that jimmying is beneficial for your mental well-being, go jimmy yourselves, everyone. I'm pretty sure the science has shown unequivocally that jimmying yourself is very good for you, actually. So, if you're feeling up for it, go for it. But yeah, I was very impressed with the caller today. There was multiple ones where the notes indicated I was like, oh boy, I'm going to brace myself. And I'm sure the call, when the screener gets limited information, also thank you, Phoebe, for call screening. When the screener gets limited information, they're going to communicate, they're going to prepare us for, every possibility. But in every instance, the person came in and there was a spicy topic, but they were very respectful. The callers today were outstanding. I'm so thrilled with how polite and engaged everyone was on this topic today.
This was a good show in that regard, I think. I think there was a lot of understanding gained and a lot of good conversation. It was really good.
Yeah, even with the one caller who didn't really seem to end and, definitely not agreeing with our position. I thought the conversation was largely respectful, which was very nice to see.
Yep. Czech Corona, is that correct? 120 from Naresh. Come on, more super chats, please. Yeah, come on, do it. Thank you, Naresh. Again.
Yes, thank you, Naresh, for spending your money to encourage people to spend money. I appreciate it. We've got $20 from Jason Jacoby. The best ships are friendships. Hashtag Team Stephanie. And Jimmy, go fuck yourself.
Yeah. $20 Canadian from Kathleen Moncrief, Team Audience, because you're both awesome and we are the real winners today. Thank you, Kathleen.
Kathleen is so sweet. I love Kathleen.
Yeah.
No, this is honestly, I always get a little anxious for the show. It's more like potentially talking to a difficult caller. It's not that I'm worried about doing it or that I think it won't go well. I'm pretty confident in my ability to converse on these issues. It's more that it's going to be a mental social cost as the trans person if it's difficult, and it's really, really nice when people don't necessarily agree, but they, I just got to keep gassing up the callers today. You guys were so good. These are the conversations I want to have where we don't necessarily have to start from the same point. Yeah. £5 from Samantha Patrick, hashtag Team Arden. Thank you. Samantha Patrick is if Katy is on, it's all Katy, and if I'm on, it's all me.
Yeah,
she alternates if we're both on.
Can't catch in a break here.
I know. It's
the worst. $5 from Master of Darkness. Hi, here's $5. Thank you, Master of Darkness.
Thank you very much. So we only have 2 or 3 super chats left. So we're going to get through them pretty quick unless you guys prove me wrong. We're definitely not going to hit any sort of mark, but I know we got to refine the system. We got to find a better way. I thought the YouTube shorts would be the better way, but it's just not. It's hard because when you do punishments, it's inherently something somebody doesn't want to do. And so getting people to do it is really difficult. Another 120 Czech Korunas from Naresh. Thank you. Found my PayPal blocked. Thought I was on Discord server for free. Made a new account. Then found out I didn't have Patreon routed through PayPal. And I have been paying. Wasted time and effort. Oh. You're talking about the Line Discord server. Okay. Well, if you paid at all, I don't know what the rules are, so I don't know if I what I can say or do about that, but we appreciate your support, Naresh. Also, 3 super chats just came in at once, so let me add those into the queue.
120 Czech Corona from Pedro Glosser. Glosser? Nothing to say. Just have these extra capitalism tokens. Here, you have them. Thank you, Pedro.
Thank you so much, Pedro, for your capitalism tokens. $10 from Daniel Pearsall. I called in about getting fired for being trans. Corporate just called me wanting details about how I got fired 12 hours after I filed ethics complaint on 2 managers, and they are researching it. Good. I hope you get some good results out of that. I remember that call out. So fucked up. I really hope you get some results out of that, even if you don't end up going back to that workplace, that they like compensate you in some way, or I don't know how that works, but I'm glad you're getting some progress there.
$5 from Neat. Robert Galbraith is a self-loathing trans. Changed my mind. Hashtag Team Miracle Whip. Hashtag Team Mayo. Go Jimmy yourselves, one and all. That was a good one, right? That was neat. That was a very good one.
Robert Galbraith. That's J.K. Rowling's shitty pseudonym.
Yes, correct.
Right. He's based on the conversion therapy guy, right?
That's correct as well.
How? It blows my mind.
Yeah, it does. It's.
There's a prominent. Oh, I wouldn't call her prominent. She was gaining traction in the atheist movement. Person who came out in support of J.K. Rowling briefly after interacting with me in person, being very. I thought it was fake nice, but I was like, I shouldn't just assume that it's fake nice. I don't know her. And then she did that, so I was like, how do people like that say that she's not a problem when that's literally her pseudonym? Like, I don't know how you can get more directly and overtly hating queer people than to name yourself that.
It's totally in your face. I mean, what the hell?
Yeah.
Joanne, jeez.
Sorry, let me add those. And then we've got $5 from Panda. Take my money. Also, great show tonight. Thank you very much, Panda. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Panda. Awesome. $5 from Ember. Hi, Ember. Adore you, Arden, but Stephanie visits me more. So, Team Stephanie.
That's fair. I just met Ember a couple of nights ago, or like a couple weeks ago. We were in a group playing not Cards Against Humanity, the online one that you can do where y'all go into a server. It's like Zizzy or something. I hated the word because it sounded like it's a slur in a language that I don't know. And I was like, I don't like that word. $5 from Skeptics and Scoundrels. Quality content as usual. Hashtag can't wait for LineCon so I can tell Jimmy to go fuck yourself in person. It's a long hashtag, Eric, but thank you. I got it out. Appreciate the quality content compliment, though.
20 Australian from Game Boy. Missed the live show. We'll watch later. Team Stephanie. Love you all. Go fuck yourself, Jimmy. Or me. Okay.
Nice. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Game Boy.
I love all the love Stephanie's getting in the chat tonight. That's great.
I'm loving it too.
50 or something.
Norwegian.
Kronos?
Norwegian. I think so.
Same one? Okay. I didn't know if they were also called Kronos, but yeah, okay. From Jonathan Wayne Williams, hashtag Team Stephanie again. First live show I've caught. Family just found my estrogen, so had to come out to my family, and it was exhausting. Nice to unwind with you. I'm so sorry they had to find out that way. I mean, in one sense, it's maybe easier because then you don't have to do all the anticipation of working up to come out. But on the other hand, it gets thrust upon you. Yeah.
What do you do now? Yeah. I'm familiar with the drill. 120 Czech krona from Pedro Gloser again. My. Naresh is dedicated to transfer the entire Czech GDP over to you. This is the last bit of it. Thank you, Pedro.
That's impressive.
We've got some Czech love. There you go. I'm old. Czechoslovakia. No. Czech love coming in today.
Does this mean we like own the country now? Or if we have their entire GDP?
Yes, we now own Prague at least.
All right, so I'm gonna declare it. It is now a trans-affirming paradise. You get all the gender-affirming care. Yeah, everything. Everyone go move there with us, and we'll have a trans-affirming paradise together. Except for now we have another 120 Czech kronas from Naresh. I spend money to make other people spend money. It's kind of like an MLM, but nobody's trying to convince me that I'll gain anything from it. Anyway, super chat, everyone. And believe it or not, we have another one coming in from Naresh. It just my system hasn't gotten updated yet. Come on. It always does it's like every 10 seconds it updates the next batch of chats.
Yeah.
And then, there we go. I guess it's yours.
Another 120 Czech krona from Naresh. Pedro Gloser is an icky patriarchy supporter, by the way. He will get you to make him sandwiches. So watch out. Maybe a team Stephanie for once? Hey, thanks.
I mean, look. If supporting the patriarchy means you're going to make me sandwiches, then I might just have to indulge the patriarchy. Okay, I love a good sandwich. Yeah. We've got $5 from Melissa. Today's show is brought to you by the letters G, F, Y, and J, as well as contribution from viewers like you. #TM. Thank you so much, Alyssa.
It's nice. $5 from Nee. Prague, capital of Transtopia. #Mayo.
Sometimes I forget that Mayo is a vote for me because, again, I like Mayo, but I'm not like a Mayo fan. It's just that Katy is so anti-Mayo that by comparison, I became Team Mayo.
I'm just not obsessed with Mayo.
I like Mayo. I prefer garlic aioli that's mayo based, but I am not. I don't have strong mayo opinions. All right, everybody, that was the last super chat. So as always, I want to say thank you to the mods. You guys do so much work in chat. I really appreciate that. It's Stephanie mods for the chat all the time, and
I know how it feels.
Yeah, and gonna test it. Luckily, I think chat seemed relatively calm today. Well, there was a group of messages back when I said this with the one guy who was like, "Oh, don't encourage them to transition." I saw there was a few bans going on around there. So, we got another one from Naresh. Hold on. 120 Czech kronas from Naresh. Czech krona and Norwegian krone, both koruna and krone means crown, despite the languages not being related. Oh, okay, got it. I got Cookie says, no at me. I don't know what the no is for. Was it because I said chat seemed calm today? It must be I was really wrong about that.
Yeah, maybe you weren't watching. I didn't see much of chat.
I wasn't watching as much today. I have an easier time watching chat while I'm producing and hosting than when I'm just producing. When I'm just producing, I get distracted too easily. But 2F slurs within 10 minutes. That's nice. Anyway,
sweet.
Let's wrap up the show. Thank you, Stephanie, so much for coming. And again, good luck to you on your future sales or sales. I don't know what the correct terminology is.
Sailing. Well, both actually.
Okay, good.
I'm making the sales. I'm going sailing. Yay, there you go.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me. It was really fun. Maybe we can do it again.
Yeah, of course. We'd love to have you again. No, it was a really, really good show. I appreciated it. And so thank you all for showing up here and making the show possible. And the callers, Shay, I can't stop saying it. The callers were so good. Please deliver more of that. It really does make the show so much better. But with that, everyone, thank you so much for being here. And we will see you all next week with our undetermined guests. Bye.
Bye.
This is the part where they can hear us, but we talk over it awkwardly, and the joke happens every time.